I think we really just have to be curious with how we approach, our marketing in general, and that certainly trickles down to the stuff that we're sharing and talking about on social media. The big thing that I talk about with storytelling is listening for stories. We focus so much on storytelling, and we glaze over the fact that we have to story listen first, especially in B2B. We have to be able to collect stories. We have to be able to hear from our audience, hear from our community members, all of those things in order to then share the stories on social media or on your website or email, anywhere else, any platform that you're doing marketing.
Welcome to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, your dedicated source for mastering B2B social media marketing challenges authentically. I'm your host, Mike Galton, and in each episode, we dive deep into the complex world of B2B marketing, from effective content creation to strategic social selling, sharing insights and strategies you can use right away. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to Social Pulse Podcast B2B Edition, where each and every week we're talking to marketing professionals like you going through many of the same struggles you're going through and sharing their stories. Subscribe to find in each episode the inspiration, the motivation, and the perspiration that go into growing and scaling organizations like yours. Now, have you ever stared at your company's social media feed and thought, how can I possibly make commercial construction interesting? Maybe you're wrestling with making logistics, financial planning, or another complex B2B industry engaging on social media. Well, you're not alone. Everyday marketers face the challenge of turning technical specifications and industry jargon into content that not only catches attention, but actually drives business results. The struggle is real, trying to balance compliance requirements, NDAs, and industry regulations while still creating content that doesn't put your audience to sleep. But what if there was a way to transform these challenges into opportunities? What if you could turn your boring industry into a source of compelling stories that resonate with your target audience? Today's guest has mastered exactly that. I am thrilled to welcome Robert Carnes, marketing manager at GreenMellen Digital Agency and author of 3 books about storytelling. Robert has helped countless B2B companies find and share their unique stories, turning complex services into compelling content that converts. As an accomplished writer and marketing professional, he's developed proven strategies for creating engaging social media content, even in the most technically challenging industries. His upcoming novel, set to be published in fall this year, further demonstrates his masterful approach to storytelling that captures and holds attention. Hey, Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Mike. I will try to live up to those lofty expectations you've set.
That's awesome. I'm sure you will. I'd love if you could start by just sharing what you think probably the biggest misconception people have about creating content for quote unquote boring industries.
Yeah, I'm glad you put air quotes around that because they can. Some of the examples that you gave, which are oftentimes a lot of the clients and the industries that we work with, can feel boring or they can feel complicated. Or they have real limitations with the type of content that they can share. But I think maybe the misconception is that they have to be boring or that they're boring by default. Like the phrase that keeps bouncing around in my mind when I think about something like this is that there's no real boring businesses. They're only boring marketers, right? If we,
Ooh.
I'll say that again. There are no boring businesses. There are only boring marketers. If you just do the default, if you, snooze on the social media content, yeah, it's going to be boring. But I think that really these industries just have extra challenges. They're sometimes legal or, compliance challenges that you have to do, or sometimes it's just harder to think of good creative content to share. But ultimately, you can still create content and share things online that are compelling and that are interesting for a lot of reasons that we're going to unpack later in this conversation. But ultimately, really, you just have to be a little bit more creative in order to engage people on social media. The one other kind of challenge that I think of a lot of these industries have, or these companies that work in these industries have, is it's harder to sometimes visualize and create visual content, whether that's images, whether that's video, whatever. It's harder to kind of create visual, compelling graphics around those type of services because you're not selling a product, right? Like that, some of the bigger consumer retail brands out there, like they have the flashy, easier job to share things on social media, which is great and fine, and we can look to them for inspiration. There's just a little bit harder that we have to work a little bit, we have to dig a little bit deeper in order to truly engage people, whether it's visually or textually or with a story. So ultimately, you don't have to be boring. And we'll unpack what it takes to get beyond that and break through kind of the noise and the grind or the challenges of your industry.
You're right. It sometimes seems like the social media manager for like the San Diego Zoo has got to have like the easiest job in the world, right? I mean, just
Sure.
nothing but stories and content and just the most adorable pictures that you could possibly imagine at his or her fingertips to share. But for more boring marketers like myself, um, walk us through your process for finding the kinds of interesting and compelling stories within some of these more technically complex businesses that we're talking about.
Sure. I think what it ultimately boils down to is curiosity. Like, I think we really just have to be curious with how we approach, I mean, our marketing in general, and that certainly trickles down to the stuff that we're sharing and talking about on social media. The big thing that I talk about with storytelling is listening for stories. We focus so much on storytelling, and we glaze over the fact that we have to story listen first, especially in B2B. We have to be able to collect stories. We have to be able to hear from our audience, hear from our community members, all of those things in order to then share the stories on social media or on your website or email, anywhere else, any platform that you're doing marketing. So really, it takes kind of having like a journalistic mindset. I studied journalism in college. That's my background before I became a marketer. And so ultimately, like, we were just trained to ask questions. We were asked to dig deeper and to do our research and to really be open-minded and interested, genuinely interested in the stories that were around us. And so, like, you have to do that. You have to be a student of your industry, be a student of your own brand and business, be a student of your audience. Like, ask them questions. We have taken time and we've worked with some of our clients to interview their clients and ask them questions about, their day-to-day life. What are their responsibilities in their job? What are the things that they wish other people knew about the work that they do? Like, figure out what motivates and interests them. What social media accounts do they follow? Like, take some time to get FaceTime with your best clients and just have an open conversation. It can yield such interesting insights and give you new opportunities and ideas for what to share. Because ultimately, these are the people you're trying to reach on social media, right? If you're talking to your best customer, you want more people like that person. I'm sure everybody listening to this has that person in mind that they're like, if only I could get more people like company X or like point of contact Y. So just try to visualize them in your mind as you're asking these questions or as you're creating social media content, and just constantly be curious about what they're interested in and what you can post that's going to grab their attention and hold their attention.
Can you share an example, maybe, of how you've transformed, or how one of the businesses that you've worked with have taken, what we would might refer to as a dry topic or a boring topic, and turned that into something that's really interesting and engaging on social media?
Sure. One of the best examples that I can think of that's a client right now that we're managing social media for, that, again, I don't think anybody would truly admit that, like, yeah, we're a boring industry. Like, that's just the way it
Yeah.
is. But so we're working with a wealth management company, this local to here in Atlanta. And, we're trying to work with them to revamp and rethink some of the things that they're doing, that we're working with them on social media. And I think they're a really good example of a challenging industry because they are highly regulated. There's a lot of compliance things around what they are allowed to say on their website, on social, through email, all those kind of things, because they have to be a fiduciary, they have to be responsible and can't give advice on, investing in those kind of things. And so, we have to be very conscientious of that, and we have to lean on them as the experts for what we're allowed to say to keep them from getting in trouble on social media. But ultimately, we're trying to help to still be engaging, to still be interesting, and to still connect with potential clients of theirs, to help grow their business. And one of the things that we've started doing for them, like the ground level work from a strategy standpoint, was just figuring out what the purpose of each of the social channels that we're on. Why are we using Facebook? What are we using LinkedIn for? Why are they different? What about Instagram? What are we trying to do there? So ultimately, like, LinkedIn is about building credibility for them as wealth managers. Facebook is about creating educational content, is about sharing new things that you need to know about their industry. And Instagram is trying to give them a little bit of personality and a little bit of behind the scenes stuff with their team. They're very highly involved in the community. they're very, hyper local, and they love doing things and sponsoring local events and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to capture more of that. That's a little bit outside of, what they do as an actual business, but still, again, it shows their personality. It gives them a unique perspective. And even if, because you don't have to be a local person to be a client of theirs, but I think it's still helpful for people to see, again, this is what they care about. This is the kind of their values reflected in what they're doing. And I think the educational piece is another big thing that we're starting to really lean on, beyond just the investment portfolio and beyond just retirement planning, because those are the easy and obvious things, and the things where they're limited the most in what they can share. And so we're trying to think, we created audience profiles of the different type of people that we want to reach on each of those different social channels, and saying, what are the things that they're interested in? What do they care about that's related to finances, but might be a little bit different? Things like travel, things like helping prepare their children for going off to college, right? College savings is a big piece of that equation. Preparing for retirement through Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, filing their taxes on time as we get closer to April 15th. Like all of those kind of things, we're trying to be aware of the whole picture of, an actual person's financial life, so that, this client can speak to them well and empathize with them, and create kind of more of a personality and more of a connection there. So it doesn't feel so dry and, here's just what the market and the economy is doing. It's a much broader picture than that. And it's approaching it with kind of that personality and with an educational bent to it as well. So that's something we're working on rolling out right now for this client. So we don't have any of the numbers or statistics for how that's going to go, but we've worked with them for several years and know a lot of the things that don't work. And we're trying to allow a lot more flexibility and adaptability as we learn what things do work in the future.
That's a really interesting approach and case study. I think another challenge that folks listening might have is the pull to go too far in trying to create engagement. Like if engagement was a pendulum, on the one hand, you've got the most boring, unengaging posts imaginable. On the other hand, you might have super funny viral memes that have very little to do with the actual business. So how do you balance maintaining, like you talked about, being on LinkedIn to have professional credibility? How do you balance that while still trying to create content that is as accessible and engaging as you possibly can?
Absolutely. I think that's a tough balance to strike. Many more people are probably on the one side of the pendulum where they're never getting anywhere close to the memes, which is fair.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can swing too far in the other direction if you're not careful. And if you haven't identified, what I think is the important key here is like finding your brand's personality, understanding, not only what the message is, but what is the tone of voice that you're trying to share on social media? How are you trying to give yourself across? And it goes very closely in hand to like your individual credibility. Like, when I'm posting on my individual social media accounts, I know what my tone of voice is. It kind of intuitively, but I also don't want to compromise that by sharing things that are outside of that. I don't want to share something that feels awkward, that would compromise my, professional integrity or something. And that feels a little extreme, but if you're not being consistent with the things that you're sharing, it can confuse people and they don't know what to expect. And so you really want to, that's again, identifying your personality as a brand first, I think is really crucially important. Like write down the list of things that your business is and is not. Write down some adjectives that describe your tone of voice, that we say these kind of things and we wouldn't say these kind of things. Like, I mean, even getting as specific as, yeah, we would share these kind of memes, or no, like that's not in our wheelhouse at all. Like, should we share GIFs or no GIFs? How much of a sense of humor do we have or not have? And then I think the other half of this as well is also really relying on or encouraging posting and activity from your employees as well, because that's something we do, including for the wealth management client that I mentioned before in the previous example. We not only manage their LinkedIn, their kind of company corporate LinkedIn page, we also manage several and help manage the content for several of their employees, their kind of top level employees, LinkedIn profiles, right? And oftentimes, on all social channels, but including LinkedIn, people trust faces a lot more than they trust logos. So we see a lot better engagement when, the CEO of the company or the marketing manager of the company shares a post compared to the brand itself. The brand might actually be bigger, but they're oftentimes going to get a lot more engagement from an individual post than they do from the company page. And so using your employees to amplify your brand and to give their own kind of personal spin and touch on it, I think also makes another really big difference. They should have their own unique voice, and hopefully it's in line with your company's voice. Hopefully it jives in the same direction. I mean, hopefully they work at your company. They've got similar core values, and you can maybe train them up and help them know what kind of things to post and not post and not get anybody in trouble. But allowing them to lend you their personal credibility and professional credibility is, I think, really huge. And this is a tricky balance as well, because you can't force employees to be active on LinkedIn. You can't coerce them to be more active. I think it's something you should encourage and find positive ways to reinforce that. One of the things that we do internally for our team and our agency, because we've got a staff of employees who's invested in digital marketing, and so they're active on their own different channels, is on our Slack group. We will post things that came from our company GreenMellen accounts and say, hey, we would really love for you guys to reshare it or comment on this, or share your own, share this in your own way, just giving people subtle nudges. And usually the team is willing to do that. They're bought in and they understand why that's beneficial to us as a company. But don't assume that they're going to do that. Don't assume that they're going to see what you posted. Don't assume that they're naturally going to want to do some education internally first, so that then they're more likely to engage, and you're more likely to have kind of a team of cheerleaders, because your internal staff is your biggest group of cheerleaders, hopefully. But that's not something you can manufacture. It's something you have to kind of grow through your culture over time. But if you're able to do that, it gives your brand a much wider and more trustworthy personality that's going to make that pendulum swing a little bit less drastic. And you'll be able to find that nice middle ground, hopefully, for your brand.
Love that advice. In fact, we actually built a feature right into AgoraPulse to help facilitate that, an advocacy feature where
Yeah.
you can schedule a post to a company LinkedIn page. And as soon as that post goes out, which might be today, it might be 3 weeks in the future, it'll automatically send an email to however employees you selected, maybe even external advocates like influencers. If you want to include them, you can. And that email will ask them if they want to go engage with that company post. And then you'll be able to track who opened it, who clicked, who liked, shared, commented on that LinkedIn post. And we're just seeing, and our clients are seeing, tremendous success with that. Because to your point, it's just so much more valuable when you get a lot of people who are vested in the content or the initiative, engaging with that. One of the coolest use cases I've seen is when companies will share a job opening and they'll ask the employees from that department to comment, engage, and share that job opening through the company page. Because
Yep.
when we've got a role for a product engineer opening at AgoraPulse, me sharing that with my marketing crowd, that's not going to go anywhere. But yeah, when you get the other 60 engineers to share that there's a job opening here, that's whom they're connected with. So that's a really great use case. I'm glad that you brought that up as a way to
Yeah.
really humanize the brand and give them that kind of more engaging option. You were going to say
Yeah.
something?
No, I think
Mm,
it's just very important. It's underutilized, I think, by a lot of brands, and it takes time to get there. I mean, that's ultimately, it's just
yeah.
like what we've been talking about. Like, this is a challenging thing to do well, but when it does work well, or when you have a tool that you can automate these things, it will, yeah, it'll bring a lot of good results your way, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. So now earlier in your example, you were talking about a financial wealth management company. And man, clients like that, they have, as you mentioned, all kinds of strict regulatory requirements. They've got NDAs. Do you have strategies for working with that kind of regulated industry?
Yeah. So to give you kind of two other similar examples to clients that we've worked with that also have some similar constraints. So we worked with a commercial construction company who did retail renovations, and they worked with some of the biggest brands, retail brands across the country. But they signed NDAs with almost all of them, right? So I mean, big, huge clients that they were happy to work with on big deals, but it would have been a huge feather in their cap if they'd have been able to promote that, and they just simply weren't because of the contract negotiations, and that's an understandable part of it. Another client that we worked with was kind of a white label agency, and they did a lot of development with other marketing agencies to build web applications and tools and integrations with other systems in the background. And it wasn't ever their client. They were working a lot of big projects, but they were working kind of through other agencies. And so they wanted to be able to promote that as well, promote those partnerships, but they weren't able to kind of claim those clients as part of the deal that they had worked out. And so they have their hands tied a little bit in how to promote this and talk about it. So the kind of two different approaches, similar approaches that we took to help out these two clients and these, kind of more complex examples was to do customer stories that were either anonymized or amalgamized. I think that's a word, anonymized or amalgamized. Basically, being able to tell the story of those client examples, because they had lots of, they knew the whole journey from beginning to end. They could talk about the customer that they were helping and the industry and all those kind of things. But, we would simply kind of gloss over or censor out the name and any identifying details about who that company explicitly was. This is also really important, I think, to make sure to get permission before you do that. That was something we made sure to do. Again, hey, customer X, we're going to talk about you. We're not going to mention your name as part of our deal. We are not going to disclose any information. We're going to make sure to share this with you before we publish it anywhere on social media, on our website. We want to make sure this is okay with you. And in most cases, they were fine. They're just, as long as you don't bring up our name or slap our logo on this, that's permissible. To kind of further, if you do have a little problem with that or need to fudge the details a little bit more, you can also do kind of amalgamizing, taking a couple of different similar clients in an industry and almost making a hypothetical kind of case study. And these essentially are case studies. I like calling them customer stories a little bit more because that is frankly a less boring title. So sometimes it's just kind of, again, your mindset shift of thinking about it as a story instead of just a case study. But yeah, giving a hypothetical example of, we've worked with clients in X industry and we've helped them in these ways. And you can make up almost a audience persona using real life examples of from your experience and the things that work, but you're simply taking out again, any identifying details of those specific clients for those legal reasons. And I think you can also be transparent with the audience you're sharing with on social media. Just have like a small note on there that says like, hey, this is not a real client, or, client's name has been changed for legal reasons. Like you hear that in journalism quite often. And I don't think we have a problem with that. We're hearing a similar story. This is based on a real client story. We have simply, changed some of the details at their request. I think as long as you kind of are transparent with your clients that you're working with and transparent with your audience, and you're still getting across, the main details that we care about is like, what is their problem? How did you help them? And what were the results? Like, that's what a case study really is. And as long as you can highlight those things without having to kind of get caught up in some of the loopholes of your industry, I think you can still connect with people and tell really, really great stories. Again, that takes a little bit more work. That takes a little bit of extra effort to make sure to know what details you can and cannot share. But once you've done that really, really well, that gives you some powerful stories that you can tell on your social channels.
That is fantastic advice. In fact, I particularly love that sort of little point you made about not calling them case studies, but calling them customer stories. Since
Yes.
becoming chief storyteller at Agorapulse, that's exactly what I've done. Not only am I doing more, but we call them success stories now,
Yeah.
and that's, we've changed that jargon across the board. And it's more than just a label; it's a mindset shift. This isn't a formal, structured case study; it's a story
Mm-hmm.
of what somebody went through, what challenges they were going through. It's that classic hero's journey, right? And what was their journey they went on to discover the possible solutions to whatever it is that they were going through. Hopefully you as the provider are part of that mix, right? And then, how did they solve their problems? Not how did you fix it? How did the customer solve their problems? That's a story that you guys can tell. And folks, we're talking with Robert Carnes about all the ways that you can reframe your approach to social media marketing for so-called boring industries. And we're going to talk specific types of content and more in a moment. But first, let's make sure you've got that tool in place to actually know what's working or not.
Actually can't say enough great things about the reporting with Agorapulse. I feel like that is my job security every month. My clients aren't that active on social media, which is why they have me manage their profiles for them. And when they get that report, it verifies that they're making a good investment.
The metrics downloads are so simple and easy to read, and it really helps me show where we are doing things right on social and where we need to improve.
So I think one of the main reasons why we decided to move to Agorapulse is because it's a more comprehensive, integrated tool for all of our marketing needs. So rather than what we have had to do historically with Sprout, which is use certain parts of that platform that work really well and then supplement it with other outside tools, by moving to Agora Pulse, we were able to keep all of that into one technology platform, which is not only a time saver, but it also makes sure that our analytics and all of our reporting's on point because we're pulling all from the same source.
It's a really great platform for agencies. It makes it really easy to manage, but gives me really, really, really robust information that actually helps me develop better strategies for my clients and better plans of action.
So Robert, let's talk content types because we've been around for a while on social media. It's not just text anymore. You've got images, different kinds of images, videos, short form videos, TikToks, Reels. What should we be focusing on, or at least thinking about, if we're in a B2B industry, somewhat complex, potentially even boring, but we want to do well on social?
The one word answer that I can give to that, quite simply based on my experience, is people. Like you said, there's a lot of different ways you can package that. You can do that videos, you can do that pictures, you can do it as reels, whatever the case. But the content that we see for our clients that always perform the best is when it is pictures of people. So, I mean, that thankfully comes in a lot of different packages. That could be photos of your team. That can be pictures of your clients, testimonial videos. You could do, holiday parties, behind the scenes stuff, birthdays or workplace anniversaries. You can do, pictures of new hires that you want to welcome to the team. You can show pictures or videos of your community service that you're doing. Like, there's a lot of different ways to show your personal personality as a brand, that you can show how you're interacting with customers, because this is all about a relationship. I mentioned before in this conversation, unlike a lot of B2C and product-based companies, we don't have it's a little bit harder to visualize the service that we're offering to people. And so the people part of that is so key. I've also alluded to the kind of educational piece, the ways you can overlap, again, behind the scenes, personality-based brand content with educational pieces. And oftentimes, if you're doing talking head videos where you're talking about the things, you're relying on your internal subject matter experts to be able to record a short form video for, basically any network now that's talking about, hey, we wish that our customers knew more about this, or this is some of the misconceptions in our industry, and we're going to talk to you about it in this 60-second video. Educating and providing value through some of those short form videos, that's something we're getting into more now. We've experimented with it a little bit, and that's becoming, and has been for a little while, one of the big trends. But ultimately, it's about people. And when you can put a person's face even to an industry, something like logistics, like we have several logistics clients, and they have lots of pictures of their trucks and their warehouses, which is awesome. But we're trying to push them as much as we can to let's show the drivers of those trucks, and let's show the people working in those warehouses who are shipping things. And every single time, we have always seen those type of social posts perform far better than everything else.
Oh, I could not agree more. When I took over as chief storyteller, early 2024, we probably had, I'd say, 30 case studies published that were, anywhere up to 10 years old. So this is, over a decade's worth of case studies that had been created. I don't know if any of them, not a single one, had any actual customer pictures associated with them. If they had images, because they were blog posts, they had stock images created, so I'm revolutionizing that. We're fixing that. I'm like, no. Every customer is going to give us a picture, at least one. I'm now asking for, do you have any group shots or pictures of your company that we can include on social? We're recording the interviews over video so we can start to create those short form videos. And a little piece of advice I'd give everyone listening: if you're not already doing this, start a podcast like this, where you can just have informal interviews with your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Robert's not a customer of mine. I'm bringing in, all kinds of folks on these shows, but if you were a customer, you could be talking through a lot of those same kinds of concepts and have some really great video using a tool like StreamYard or Ecamm. It's fairly easy. And it's really easy to, take those clips out these days. And now you're powering your social channels. You're creating that human element, which is needed more today than ever before.
Yes.
So let's assume we're doing all those things. Robert, we're posting to social. We're sharing, images of our employees, of our customers, where they're achieving success. How do we know how those are impacting the actual business results. How are you currently measuring it, or your clients? How are you guys measuring that?
Sure. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, and I'm hopefully will not be the last one, but trying as best we can to steer away from vanity metrics, things just like look at our reach or look at the number of likes we got. Like oftentimes our clients want to see those numbers because that's what they're familiar with, and those are the things that they can track most easily. So we oftentimes will report them, but we try to report them in the larger context of, oh, but here's what that means. Here's the larger engagement piece, and not all engagements on social media are created equal. Like I would much rather have a comment than a like, because it took somebody a little bit more time to pause and engage with the content, and that's a much bigger indicator of whether or not they were curious and whether or not they actually grabbed their interest, rather than just their passing attention, right? And so placing an emphasis on that kind of engagement, and then conversions as well. Like website traffic is fine, but like, did that actually lead to something on your website? Did that lead to them filling out a contact form, or actually picking up the phone and calling you or something like that? And I will say that even these metrics are becoming harder to measure sometimes. Engagement, like based on your industry, like it's hard to tell if you're even getting any comments or shares, and if you're getting the right ones or not, how much of it is spam or not based on the platform, like all this crazy stuff. And then even something like website traffic, dark social, that, traffic that does not get tagged as social media in an analytics tool like Google Analytics makes it a little bit harder to actually, measure the whole funnel and see where people are coming from. But that's still, like, just because it's a little bit more challenging to track and takes a little bit more effort, because it's super easy to just track reach and likes. It takes a little bit more to kind of go further down the funnel and really be able to see what value your social media content is providing. But again, the thing that I say is, the better and more valuable the metric, oftentimes the more difficult it is to track. And there's a new metric that I did not come up with. This is from a guy named Jay Acunzo, who I really like and appreciate, and would encourage you guys to check out and follow.
Jay's terrific. Absolutely.
Yes. So he came up with just recently a new metric, since they're all just invented by somebody at some point, URR, unsolicited response rate. This is on social, and this is across all other marketing channels. But basically, how many people actually reached out to you in a different way without you having to ask for it, right? You're sharing consistently on social media, you're talking and engaging with people on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is, and somebody sends you an email and says, "Hey, I watched that video you did recently, and I was really interested in this. Can you answer, these questions that I've got for you?" Like, that doesn't happen all that often. We don't see that a ton. But when you can get something like that, when you can get someone who actually, again, unsolicitedly reaches out to you and does the extra effort to like show their interest and curiosity in something you're creating, that's a huge green flag that you're doing something right. Right. And so again, that, just like we've talked about with so many things, that's a mindset shift. That's a much more challenging thing to do. That's a much more manual and difficult thing to be able to actually track. But if you can start hitting that and getting people to respond to you in those ways, even just direct messaging you on one of these social channels and saying, "Hey, I really like the stuff you're sharing. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you guys offer?" That is a huge win, way beyond just we got another 100 subscribers on our YouTube channel or something like that. Like those things are fine, but they are mostly just drivers of these other end results. And it's much better to look at the target rather than just some of the steps along the way.
That makes so much sense. I love that. In fact, you reminded me of a similar metric that Anne Hanley put out. And I don't remember exactly what she called it, but it was essentially how many people replied to her newsletter directly to her with a question, or an ask for help or something along those lines. And the key, I think, between both of those is you're now measuring something of real business import. You know that now you're creating a relationship with an individual that may lead to actual business results, a sale or a speaker or whatever it is that you're looking for with your business. It'd be like me tracking demo requests from this podcast. That's
Sure.
not a normal thing that someone would track
Yeah.
from a podcast, because you don't normally have that kind of one-to-one driving activity from this medium. But if you do once in a while, that's powerful. And it's
Yeah.
important that you're tracking that. And the one thing I'll interject real quick is that if you guys aren't using Agorapulse, we'll automatically track every single link that you share, even if they're comments, direct messages, the dark social that Robert talked about a second ago. We put UTM parameters on there, including a unique UTM for every single link, so that you will be able to it'll show up in Google Analytics, but then actually we pull it back into GoraPulse for you. So you don't have to use GA if you don't want to. You'll be able to see exactly what traffic and potentially revenue and events you're driving with your social. So that's your point is 100% valid. It is so hard to track the real stuff, which is why, according to the statistics and the research we've done, 92% of marketers don't. They just don't. They don't bother tracking it because they just put up their hands and say, "Oh, we can't." But
it's an extra step, and UTM codes are a great way to work around that and to track things. But it takes a little bit of extra thought, or you have to have a tool that does some of those things for you. And also, good example with Anne, because I am one of the people who's actually responded to some of her email newsletters before.
Yeah.
So great example.
Same. Yeah, her writing is fantastic. We'll have links to Jay and Ann for sure in the show notes for you folks if you're not familiar with those two folks. But I wonder what other tools or other resources like Jay and Ann have you found are most helpful in creating truly engaging B2B content?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think using a tool like Agorapulse is an easy one. It's having a social management platform that aggregates a lot of that stuff for you and automates some of it. I'm sure a lot of people will talk about generative AI and some of the LLMs out there. Like those are easy wins to at least iterate and brainstorm a lot of social content. So those are fairly easy layups that I'm sure a lot of people will talk about and are already on people's minds. So I'm gonna bring up two others that you may not know about and frankly are secret weapons of mine that I really, really appreciate. One of them is called GigaBrain. It's another AI tool, but it aggregates a lot of data from Reddit and pulls together, like you can ask it a question and it will search Reddit and community answers. Obviously anybody can post stuff to Reddit, so you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, but it's just really interesting. It's an interesting source of data to pull from. And it's a pretty powerful, it's got a free version of the tool, but you can also pay a little bit more for more searches and that kind of thing. That's a tool that I use periodically when I'm doing some research. The other tool, though, that I use far more and would highly encourage anybody to check out is called SparkToro. It is a really, really powerful and useful audience research software that you can search based on a website, your own website, a competitor's website. You can search on your industry. You can search on a multitude of keywords. And it will give you basically an audience profile and say, hey, of the people who typically visit your website, here are the other search terms that they're looking at. Here are the audience or the social media platforms that they're most following. Here are the podcasts that they like to listen to and the subreddits that they most subscribe to and the YouTube channels that they visit most often. Like it gives you, it's amazing how many data points and how much you can dive into this based on a simple keyword search. And again, it takes a little bit of extra time to look through those, but I mean, it is a gold mine if you use it well for content ideas, for other places to go for inspiration and research. It is something I use multiple times a week and highly encourage people to check out. SparkToro, if you want to just, again, it's about the mindset of knowing your audience, knowing your brand, and then providing value between the two of those things. And that is a tool that I use massively in that endeavor.
Love those recommendations. I had Rand Fishkin on a fireside chat last year, I think, as part of our agency summit. I'll see if I can dig that out of the archive and publish it for you folks and link to it, because terrific conversation about real specific use cases of how to use SparkToro and the benefits that it gives folks. Those are both terrific suggestions. We'll link to both of those in the show notes, of course. What final advice would you give to marketers who maybe they're still struggling with making their content more engaging, particularly on social?
Sure. So we've talked about kind of being curious, being students of your audience and your brand, asking those questions. I think, coming back to that is a really, really important piece. I think there's kind of two interesting ways to approach that as well, is sometimes start with the bad ideas. I attended a conference a while back where there was a whole talk about how to use bad ideas, sometimes just by eliminating them or sparking better ideas from that. So sometimes just write down the list of all the social posts that you can't do. Like, what is the thing that your company definitely should not post on LinkedIn? And that might give you maybe think about the opposite, and you might want to post that. We actually tried something recently. We talked about case studies and customer success examples. We at GreenMellen actually last year posted an anti-case study with this person's permission. They were a person who did not choose us to build their website or do marketing. And they came back to us about 6 months later and we said, we really wish we had picked you. We are really regretting our decision with not going with you. And we're like, can we tell this story? Like we kind of, worked on it and worked with them to kind of get their approval and everything. But that was just an interesting way to look at the inverse, because so oftentimes we're looking at customer success stories, but like, what about those stories of people who weren't successful because they didn't work with you, right? It kind of builds that stakes of like why this is really important, or why it's worthwhile to work with our company, because we will treat you in X, Y, and Z way, and you can expect this and not this. It's not about bad mouthing your competitors. It's about just showing why you have the core values you do. And then the final thing that I'll say about this, because again, it very much goes against the idea of boring brands and boring industries, is like having a sense of humor. I know we talked about, does the pendulum swing too far if we share memes and GIFs and all that kind of stuff? Well, I really desperately want more B2B brands to actually have a sense of humor. Like, there's not many who do, and you really can stand out in your industry if you were bold enough to take some of those risks and try to be funny. Again, it takes extra work. It requires more creativity in order to do that. And I don't just mean telling crass jokes or that kind of thing. Like, it requires you to find the balance and find the line of what you're like appropriately allowed to do and what you feel comfortable doing that's still authentic to your brand. And it's not going to work for every brand or every industry. Some audiences might be very turned off by that. But I really wish that more B2B companies would try that, partially just because it livens things up, and it definitely sparks curiosity and interest when a brand, I mean, B2B, B2C, anything, is willing to try that. So don't be afraid to put in the extra work. Don't be afraid to kind of overcome some of your hurdles with a little bit of creativity and curiosity, and maybe humor as well.
Terrific advice. My friend Jen Herman loves to point to the Transportation and Security Administration, the TSA, as an example of what would seemingly be a very boring and dull and potentially complex and very serious
Yeah.
topic. Travel security at airports, the TSA that we all know. Their Instagram account is lit, folks. If you're not following TSA on Instagram, go do it right now. They're fantastic. They're talking in a humorous yet respectful way about the bizarre things that people try to bring through security, and they're just incredibly clever in their Instagram captions. So I won't spoil it anymore for anyone, but go check that out. But that's terrific advice. I did have one quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
That anti-case study, love the idea. Now, was that simply somebody who'd chosen somebody else and they weren't happy, or did they actually come back to GreenMellen after a certain amount of time?
I don't believe they are a current customer. I think we had to kind of clean up a few things that they did not like about the other agency that they decided to go with. But it was interesting because, again, they initially liked us and just had a couple like, hey, we need to do it a little bit cheaper. We need to do it a little bit faster. Like, there's always the same, similar excuses that we get. And it's so funny that oftentimes they'll come back and go, hey, actually the website ended up costing more with this other agency, or, oh, hey, like it actually took a little bit longer with the other agency than we were expecting. So it, like, we try to explain that to people often, like if we hear that same pattern being repeated in other potential customers and leads. And so we're like, could we have, like, it'd be great if we had an example of that, of somebody, not us, because they're going to trust another, third party a lot more than they will our brand. Like, can we tell that and discuss some of those pain points? So yeah, I mean, it's a very delicate balance that you have to land there. But yeah, when done right, and there's not many examples I can give of that, because the person actually has to come back to you and maybe admit that they were wrong or something, or just made a different decision than what they might have. So it's a very unique opportunity that not everybody's going to get, but find those opportunities when you can and capitalize on them in the right way.
I love the idea. I mean, I'm currently pursuing and recording and publishing stories of customers that came from a competitor, and they came to us. I have heard stories like yours of, like, former Agorapulse customers who switched to a different brand, and then they let us know that they weren't happy with their decision. But maybe they're in a contract, so they haven't come back.
Sure.
So now you've given me the idea. Well, I could potentially talk to some of those and share, like you said, in a very respectful and yet very clear way.
Right.
They're not happy with their decision, and here's why. And you, as the prospect, you're thinking about switching away, or a customer is thinking about switching away. the grass isn't always greener on the other side, as the idiom goes. But Robert, you've been fantastic. This has been such a really fascinating conversation for folks who want to reach out to you. Maybe they want to know more about these past books that you've published, or maybe they're just curious about the novel that you've got coming. Where should they go?
Sure. So, I mean, certainly check out the work that we do at GreenMellen. Again, we're a local to Atlanta digital marketing agency. Happy to have conversations with anybody in B2B and service-based businesses. GreenMellenmedia.com is how to find out the work that we do. For myself, if the primary book that I think would be relevant and helpful to this audience is the story cycle that I wrote about how to craft a good story and make a strong message that will resonate with people, and the kind of practical ways to do that through storytelling. It's also full of a lot of examples, story examples from real businesses, to try to help illustrate how we do that. So storycyclebook.com is where you can check that out. And I mean, if you want to find out more about me, robertcarnes.org is another place where you can find out more about me and the other books that are out or that will come out very, very soon. So look forward to connecting with anyone and everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Thank all of you for listening. We will, of course, have all those links in the show notes below. And don't forget to find the Social Pulse Podcast B2B edition on Apple and drop us a review if you enjoyed today's show. I'd love to know what you think. Until next time. Thank you for joining another episode of Social Pulse Podcast B2B edition, hosted by Mike Halton and powered by Agorapulse, the leading social media management solution. Learn more at agorapulse.com. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player and leave us a review. We value your feedback and look forward to bringing you more useful insights.